One word online. That's how I met my wife. Now we argue over milk in the kitchen, but I wouldn't trade that same for anything. I still remember the night I typed it. I'd been scrolling endlessly through a thread about adult life, bills, deadlines, pretending you have it all together. I wasn't tired physically. I was tired of pretending. I typed, I'm so tired of pretending I have it all figured out. Hit post, felt silly, and locked my phone. That should have been it. That should have been the end, except someone replied. One word. Same. No emoji. No comment about what I had written. Just same. I stared at the screen too long. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to say something clever, something funny. Instead, I typed, glad I'm not the only one. She replied almost immediately, definitely not. That was it. That small exchange changed something I didn't realize at the time. She was just a stranger online, but that word same felt like someone sitting beside me, noticing the quiet chaos of my life. Over the next few days, we kept replying to each other. Not flirting, not trying to impress, just honest words. I found myself looking forward to notifications. Not for validation, for connection. The simplicity of it. The sincerity. One night I sent a voice note, a half laugh, half whine about how exhausting work had been. She replied with a voice note of her own, short but soft, and I caught her laughing halfway through. That laugh made me smile alone in my room like an idiot. I realized then that I wanted to hear her voice again. We started moving our chats to messages, little jokes, observations, complaints, everything banal but comforting. I didn't think about love, not yet. I just noticed how easy it was to talk to her, how safe it felt. One evening, after a long workday, she sent a random photo of her messy living room. I laughed and sent one of mine. Suddenly we were sharing spaces without being in them. Spaces that suddenly felt connected. She never pressured me. I never pressured her. Everything was slow and careful. It felt fragile and beautiful at the same time. The connection existed quietly but strongly, growing without us trying. The first time I thought maybe this could be something more, I didn't admit it. I just felt it. That tiny shift from comfort to curiosity, that subtle awareness that maybe I was not alone in feeling lost in the chaos of life. That maybe this person who had written one word, same, could become someone who mattered. And that thought scared me more than it thrilled me. But I couldn't stop thinking about her, couldn't stop checking for messages, couldn't stop smiling at her voice note that made no sense to anyone but me. Have you ever met someone online in the smallest way and it changed your life forever? After that first few days of casual messages, something shifted without us noticing. We stopped replying immediately. We stopped keeping things short. Conversations stretched into hours. We were no longer just replying. We were talking, sharing, laughing at things no one else would understand. It started with a voice note from her, a soft, quiet laugh while she told a story about spilling coffee on her laptop. I laughed out loud alone in my room. Then I sent my own story, clumsy and awkward, about nearly missing a deadline because I'd forgotten lunch. She replied instantly, not with judgment, not with a lecture, just understanding. That was the first time I realized connection could feel so simple and heavy at the same time. We talked about work, yes, but also about things we never told anyone. Childhood memories, fears, family drama, silly secrets. Even the things that made us embarrassed to speak aloud found a place in our messages. She listened, really listened, and I started noticing myself listening too. Not just to her words, but to the way she said them. Some nights, our conversations ran late. I would stay awake, waiting for her reply. My friends noticed. They asked why I was texting so late. I didn't answer. I couldn't. It wasn't the texting. It was the way I felt when I read her words. A quiet thrill. A warmth that felt unfamiliar, safe. Eventually, we moved from text to calls. The first call was clumsy. We laughed nervously at awkward pauses, and I realized how much I cared about filling them. I wanted to hear her voice again, her laugh, the way she said my name. That first call lasted nearly an hour. When we finally said goodnight, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I'd shared so much. Heavier because I wanted more. We didn't know it yet, but something had started. Something real. Something that had nothing to do with online comments or coincidence. Something that was quietly claiming space in our lives. One weekend, she sent a photo of her messy living room. I sent a photo of mine. We laughed about how chaotic we were. In that moment, I felt like we were connected in a way I couldn't explain. I realized that the same word that brought us together had created a bridge between our everyday lives. We began talking about future dreams casually, not as a plan, but as a story. She mentioned wanting to travel. I mentioned wanting to learn piano again. She laughed. I laughed. These dreams weren't commitments. They were glimpses into a life that might exist together someday. That was the first time I felt something I couldn't name. It wasn't love yet, not quite, but it was a seed, small and fragile. And I knew if I wasn't careful, it could grow into something I couldn't ignore. Have you ever felt a small, quiet connection with someone that scared and thrilled you at the same time? After months of messages and late-night calls, we decided to meet. Not a big date, not anything dramatic. Just coffee, a neutral place, somewhere public but quiet enough to talk. I remember feeling my stomach twist with nerves as I got ready. What if it felt different in real life? What if the comfort we had online disappeared the moment I saw her? I arrived early, sat with my phone, scrolling nervously while sipping water I barely tasted. Then I saw her. She wasn't exactly like her photos, and that was okay. She smiled shyly, waved, and walked toward me. Something in the way she moved made my chest tighten in a way that wasn't fear. It was curiosity, anticipation, something I hadn't felt in a long time. We ordered coffee, sat at a small corner table. The first few minutes were awkward, small talk that felt heavy because it mattered more than we were letting on. But then she laughed at something I said. Not just a polite chuckle, a full, genuine laugh that crinkled her eyes and made my heart do a quiet flip. I laughed too, louder than I realized I could. We talked for hours, about work, about family, about the weird quirks we never mentioned to anyone else, about how sometimes life felt too heavy to carry alone. She didn't judge me. She didn't try to impress me. She just listened. And I listened back. That kind of listening felt rare and precious. At some point, we shared a moment of silence. I noticed how calm it felt, How natural it was to sit next to her and not fill the space with meaningless words. That quietness carried more honesty than anything we had typed or spoken before. I realized then that she wasn't just a stranger who replied same online. She was becoming someone who mattered. Before leaving, we walked outside. The sky was fading into evening. She reached for my hand, not dramatically, not like in a movie, just her hand in mine, solid, familiar, real. That tiny touch said more than any words ever could. After that day, our relationship changed. We didn't rush anything. We didn't label it. But every message, every call, every small conversation carried a weight it hadn't before. We were no longer just voices on a screen. We were two lives beginning to overlap, quietly, imperceptibly, beautifully. The connection felt fragile, but it also felt inevitable. That same word that had started it all, same, had brought us together. But it was our conversations, our honesty, our laughter that kept us there. I realized love didn't have to be explosive or dramatic. It could start small, gentle, and still take your breath away when it grew. That night, I lay awake thinking about her, thinking about how one random reply could lead to hours of laughter, comfort, and connection. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't need to. I just knew I wanted her in my life. Have you ever met someone in real life and felt the connection you had online wasn't just digital, it was real? After we met, things started to feel inevitable. Not in a forced way, not like destiny was pushing us, just natural. We started spending more time together. Weekends, evenings, even quiet mornings, just sharing coffee and talking about nothing and everything. It was comfortable, but not boring. It was alive. A few months in, we decided to spend a holiday together. Not fancy, just a small weekend getaway to a cabin near the lake. We laughed about how we were already acting like an old couple planning vacations. She teased me about overpacking. I teased her about her over-organized itinerary. Every little argument was light, funny, and made me realize I liked her more every second. The drive there was quiet at first. Neither of us wanted to force conversation, but then she started singing softly to a song on the radio. I joined in, off-key and ridiculous, and she laughed so hard that I almost drove off the road. That laugh, that moment, I felt something settle in my chest, something I hadn't expected, something I was scared to name. The cabin was small and cozy. We unpacked our things and wandered around the lake. The sun was low, painting the water gold, and I remember feeling like I had stepped into a dream. She grabbed my hand, not needing to say anything, and I squeezed back. No words could match what we were feeling. That night, we cooked dinner together in the tiny kitchen. We burned the pasta slightly and laughed at the mess we made. Eating by candlelight, we talked about our childhoods, our fears, the small regrets that made us human. I noticed how deeply I was listening, how every little detail mattered. I wanted to remember it all. When it rained outside, we huddled under a blanket and played board games we hadn't touched since we were kids. We got competitive, argued playfully, and ended up laughing on the floor because nothing went according to plan. I realized then that I wanted more of this, more laughter, more closeness, more life with her. The trip ended too soon. Driving back, I kept stealing glances at her, noticing how her hair caught the sunlight, how her hand rested on the gear shift, how her laugh made even traffic feel tolerable. That simple weekend showed me that love didn't need fireworks. It didn't need a grand declaration. Sometimes it could start with same and grow quietly until it consumed your every thought. By the time we returned, I was thinking about her constantly, not in a fleeting crush way, not in a dramatic, all-consuming way, just in a way that made me want to build my life around her. That night, she texted me, same weekend, next month? And I laughed, realizing that one word could still make my heart race after all these months. Have you ever realized that love can grow quietly in small moments without drama? A few months after that first holiday, we started talking seriously about moving in together. Not because we were rushing anything, but because it felt natural. Spending weekends apart felt harder than we expected. Our lives had begun to overlap so seamlessly that separate apartments felt inconvenient. I remember the day we decided. We were sitting in my living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes I hadn't yet organized. She leaned back on the couch, her legs tucked under her, and asked softly, "Do you think we could?" I didn't even wait for the question to finish. I said yes. I wanted yes as much as she did. Moving in together was an adjustment, of course. Small things became surprisingly big. Whose turn was it to take out the trash? How many mugs could live in the dishwasher before it overflowed? Where the towels belonged? But every tiny conflict came with laughter. Every disagreement ended with compromise or a playful apology. I noticed how easy it was to navigate life with her, how natural it felt to share space with someone whose habits you know, but whose presence still surprises you. I discovered little things about her that I loved. The way she left the lights on when she fell asleep reading, the way she hummed softly while cooking, how she organized the pantry so meticulously I couldn't resist rearranging it just to annoy her. She discovered things about me too. How I leave books everywhere, how I can get lost in my own thoughts for hours, how I forget where I put things constantly. Evenings became my favorite part of the day. Coming home to her, to shared meals, to soft music in the background, to her smile when she greeted me, it felt like a small, perfect world. We were building routines that made life feel steady and comforting, and yet each day held the thrill of small discoveries. Of course, not everything was seamless. There were moments of frustration, moments when I wondered if we had moved too fast, but those moments were brief and honest. I realized that living together didn't mean perfection. It meant patience, empathy, and the willingness to keep choosing each other every single day. One night, after a long day at work, I found her asleep on the couch with a book open in her lap. I smiled quietly, careful not to wake her. I realized then that love wasn't just in words or grand gestures. It was in the quiet moments, in watching someone sleep safely in your shared space, in knowing you were both building a life together without needing the world to approve. Living together was a milestone that didn't feel monumental because everything about her felt natural, and yet it changed everything. The tiny word, same, had blossomed into something real, something steady, something I knew I wanted to protect. We even started talking about the future, joking about imaginary pets and weekend getaways, imagining a life that belonged to both of us. And while I didn't say it aloud yet, I knew that one day I'd want to call this person my wife. Have you ever realized that sharing everyday life with someone can make your love grow stronger than any grand gesture ever could? Living together was magical, but it wasn't perfect. One evening, after a long day at work, we got into our first real argument. It was stupid, small, about dishes left in the sink and the way we both seemed to forget to take out the trash, but in that moment, it felt huge. I remember slamming a plate down, frustrated not just at her, but at the world, at my day, at the exhaustion I carried. She crossed her arms, eyes narrowing, and for a second I wondered if this would be the start of something ugly. But then she sighed, soft and weary, and I realized we weren't really fighting about the dishes. We were fighting because living together meant our flaws were exposed. Our small annoyances had faces, and we could no longer hide behind online screens or casual weekends. We sat on the couch afterward, awkwardly quiet. I wanted to say something profound, but all that came out was a small, "I don't want us to fight like this." She nodded, biting her lip, then said quietly, "Me neither." That honesty softened the tension instantly. We laughed a little, nervously, realizing how silly the fight had been. And then we talked, really talked, about habits, about expectations, about how we could make living together work without letting the little things build up into resentment. For the first time, I felt like our relationship was real. Not just comfortable, not just fun, but something that could survive conflict. That night, after making up, we stayed up talking for hours about our pasts, our insecurities, things we'd never shared before. I realized that vulnerability wasn't scary. It was necessary. That fight had been a test of our patience and care, and we had passed it. Somehow, arguing about dishes taught me more about love than months of laughter and messages ever could. The next morning, we woke up to sunlight streaming through the window. She made coffee for both of us, and I felt a rush of gratitude. Love, I realized, wasn't just about butterflies or easy smiles. It was about choosing someone even after a fight. Choosing someone when life wasn't perfect. Choosing someone when the dishes were left in the sink. Over time, those small arguments became normal. We learned to navigate them without anger, with humor, and sometimes with ice cream as a peace offering. Each fight taught us patience, understanding, and how deeply we valued each other. We were growing together, learning not just how to live side by side, but how to care for each other in everyday life. Even now, years later, we laugh about our first fight. We joke that if we survived dishes and trash, we could survive anything. And I smile because those small conflicts, those tiny moments of discomfort, only made us stronger. They reminded me that love wasn't easy, but it was worth every moment. Do you think the first fight with someone you love can make a relationship stronger if handled the right way? After living together for over a year, it was time for me to meet her family. I'd met a few online friends in my life, sure, but this felt entirely different. Meeting her family felt like stepping into a new world, one that she had already inhabited for years. I was nervous. I wanted to make a good impression, but I also wanted them to see the her I loved, not a polished version of myself. The drive to her parents' house was quiet. We held hands across the console, exchanging small smiles. I asked her if she was nervous too. She shook her head, almost laughing at me. "Not really," she said. "They'll love you, just be yourself." That phrase, "just be yourself," repeated in my head like a mantra. When we arrived, I felt my chest tighten. Her parents opened the door with warm smiles. Her mom hugged me immediately, and her dad gave me a firm handshake that somehow put me at ease. We talked about trivial things at first, the weather, traffic, her mom's garden, before moving on to deeper topics. I felt welcomed, not interrogated, and I realized that mattered more than I expected. Her siblings were playful, teasing me gently, and she whispered explanations when I felt overwhelmed. Watching her interact with them, I felt proud. I realized I had fallen for someone whose kindness extended naturally, not selectively. During dinner, I paid attention to the small things, how she refilled my glass before hers, how she caught my eye across the table, the subtle touches and smiles that reminded me why I loved her. She was patient with me, and it allowed me to be myself without fear. Later that evening, we went for a walk around her neighborhood. The streets were quiet, lined with familiar houses and soft lamplight. We walked hand in hand, talking about nothing in particular, but everything. She told me stories from her childhood, and I listened, amazed at how freely she shared herself. I realized that meeting her family hadn't changed her. It had only highlighted the parts I already loved. Back at their house, as we said goodnight, her mom pulled me aside and whispered, "We can see how happy she is with you. That's all that matters." I felt warmth spread through me, not from pride, but from relief. I belonged in her world just as much as she belonged in mine. Driving home, we stayed quiet, comfortable in the silence that comes after a meaningful day. I felt my heart swell in a way I hadn't before. I thought about how this relationship had grown from one word online, how it had blossomed into something real, something strong, something that felt like home. I realized then that love wasn't only about us. It was about the people we brought into our lives, the families we created along the way, the shared memories that stitched us together. Have you ever met someone's family and realized how much it could deepen your connection with them? It was a quiet evening, the kind where the world feels soft and slow. We had been together for 3 years, living together, laughing together, fighting over dishes, sharing late-night stories, and slowly building a life that felt safe and full. I didn't expect a proposal, not in a flashy movie-style way. I didn't even notice the shift at first. We were at home, sitting on the couch with mugs of tea, talking about our day. She reached over and brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. That simple gesture stopped me mid-sentence. There was something in her eyes, serious, gentle, unwavering, that I hadn't seen before. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice calm but carrying weight. "Of course," I said, trying to hide the sudden flutter in my chest. She took my hand in both of hers, holding it carefully. "I want us to keep building this life together. I want to choose you every day, not just because it's easy, but because it matters. Will you marry me?" The words hung in the air, not dramatic, not rushed, just honest. My heart caught in a way I didn't expect. I laughed softly, tears welling up, because of course I wanted that. Of course I wanted her. Yes, I whispered, and I meant it in every part of me. We didn't call anyone immediately. We stayed on the couch, holding each other, savoring the quiet gravity of the moment. It wasn't about the ring or the announcement or the celebration. It was about the truth of what we had built together. The trust, the laughter, the shared silences, the little arguments over who forgot the trash, the comforting routines that had grown into a shared rhythm of life. Over the next few weeks, we planned quietly. Nothing extravagant. We wanted the wedding to reflect who we were, not what anyone expected. Family, a few close friends, a simple ceremony that felt like an extension of our life rather than an interruption. When the day arrived, I remember walking down the aisle thinking about that tiny word, same, that had started it all. One word online, one simple acknowledgement of shared exhaustion had grown into this, into love, into commitment, into a life I couldn't imagine living without her. As we exchanged vows, I noticed the little things, the way her eyes softened when she looked at me, the small smiles we shared across the room, the quiet laughter from friends and family. It felt intimate, real, and perfectly us. That night, as we danced alone in our living room, at home instead of a ballroom, I realized something crucial. Love didn't always have to be dramatic to be profound. It didn't need fireworks or grand gestures to be life-changing. Sometimes it started with a single word and grew quietly, until one day, you realized it was everything. I thought about all the nights of texting and laughing and sharing small stories, all the weekends spent together, the fights, the silences, the comfort, and I understood fully that love was not just about the big moments. It was about the accumulation of tiny truths, tiny choices, tiny shared moments that ultimately became your life. Have you ever realized that the smallest beginnings can lead to the biggest commitments in life? Marriage settled around us quietly like the soft glow of morning light through our bedroom curtains. It wasn't fireworks or constant excitement. It was making coffee together, laughing over burnt toast, arguing gently about whose turn it was to take out the trash. It was real. It was constant, and it was ours. I noticed the small things first. How she left her shoes in the exact same spot by the door every day, how she hummed softly while washing dishes, how she tapped her fingers on the table when she was thinking. A habit I had memorized without realizing. These little routines made me feel safe, connected, loved in a way I hadn't expected. We didn't always agree. Sometimes the dishwasher argument turned into a half-hour negotiation. Sometimes she forgot to refill the milk, and I would pretend to scold her while secretly smiling at the predictability of it all. Every disagreement, every small annoyance, only reminded me that we were human and that our love wasn't fragile. It was real, textured, imperfect. Evenings became our favorite part of the day. She would curl up beside me on the couch, scrolling through our phones or sharing little stories from work. I would rest my head against her shoulder, listening, absorbing. Sometimes we would talk, sometimes we would sit in silence, letting the quiet settle comfortably between us. Those quiet moments spoke volumes. Weekends were our adventures, small and simple. Grocery shopping together, trying out new recipes, binge-watching shows we both secretly loved, wandering in the park holding hands. Life wasn't always exciting, but it was full. It was ours. And every day I noticed how much I loved the rhythm we had created. The best part, I realized, was that love didn't demand perfection. It asked only that we show up, that we care, that we keep choosing each other in little ways every single day, that the text in the morning asking if she wanted coffee actually mattered because she answered and smiled, because we shared our small lives and our big dreams in tandem. I remembered that first word, same, and marveled at how far we had come. From strangers online, to late-night voice notes, to our first date, our first fight, our first holiday together, to living together and finally marriage. Life had a quiet way of surprising me, of teaching me that love could start small and grow immense without ever feeling forced or rushed. Sometimes we would argue over trivial things, milk, laundry, or who left the lights on, but even those moments reminded me of the honesty we had built. Our love wasn't built on convenience or avoidance. It was built on truth, on choosing each other even in minor frustrations, even when life felt ordinary. And in the quiet of our shared apartment, in the gentle hum of our routines, I realized that this was what love had always meant. Not drama, not perfection, just being chosen and choosing someone back every single day. Do you think love is stronger in everyday routines and small moments than in dramatic gestures? Now, years later, I sit on our couch watching her move around the kitchen, humming softly, looking for the milk we both forgot to buy again. I smile, not because life is perfect, but because it is ours. Every laugh, every small argument, every quiet moment of shared understanding has built this life we share. I often think about that one word, same, the reply she gave to a comment I barely remember posting. I think about how something so tiny could ripple into something so enormous. One word led to a voice note, to late-night talks, to shared breakfasts and weekend getaways, to moving in together, to marriage. It reminds me that love doesn't have to begin with fireworks. Sometimes it begins with recognition, understanding, and presence. Our love is not dramatic, and it doesn't need to be. It is a series of choices, repeated daily. The choice to listen instead of interrupting, to laugh instead of getting angry, to apologize without pride, to hug without reason. Love lives in small gestures, small kindnesses, small sacrifices. Love is noticing that the milk is gone and teasing each other instead of blaming. Love is noticing the soft hum of her voice and feeling home in it. I often think about how much we've grown together, how we've navigated misunderstandings and arguments and quiet disappointments, how we've learned to be honest, even when honesty is hard. We have learned to love not despite our imperfections, but alongside them. Our love is patient, forgiving, and enduring. It is gentle, yet it carries weight. It is quiet, yet profoundly transformative. I remember the nervousness of our first in-person meeting, the careful attention to each other's words, each other's feelings. I remember the laughter that followed, the awkward pauses, the shared silences that spoke volumes. I remember that tiny spark, the acknowledgement of shared exhaustion, that would grow slowly into a life built together. Sometimes I catch myself marveling at how small things matter so much. One word online, one shared glance, one cup of coffee, one hug after a long day. These tiny moments are the threads that weave a life together. They form the fabric of intimacy, connection, and trust. And through all the ordinary moments, the spilled milk, the missed deadlines, the quiet evenings, we have built something extraordinary. I look at her now, moving around our shared space, and feel gratitude. Not for perfection, not for grand gestures, but for presence, for love that chooses every day, for someone who sees me, knows me, and still wants me, for someone who turns ordinary life into something worth cherishing. And I think about how I would tell my past self, years ago when I typed that comment and hit send, that one word can change your life in ways you cannot imagine. That love can begin quietly, unexpectedly, and grow into a life you could not have planned, but that you wouldn't trade for anything. Yes, we still argue over milk sometimes, but I wouldn't have it any other way, because every small argument, every tiny shared moment, every ordinary day is proof that we are here, together, real, chosen, and infinitely loved. Have you ever realized that love often grows in quiet, ordinary moments rather than in dramatic gestures?